Welcome to Disrupting Japan, straight talk from Japan's most innovative founders and VCs. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for joining me. Finance, and venture capital in particular, has always been male-dominated. And in Japan, well, it's even more so. But things are changing here, and not quite in the way you might expect. Today we sit down with Sophie Meralli, a partner at Shizen Capital and co-founder of Tokyo Women in VC. And we have a frank discussion about what it's really like for female founders and venture capitalists here in Japan. And some of it is surprising. In some areas it seems that Japan is ahead of the West, and in others, well, not so much. The conversation is at times both frustrating and hopeful. Sophie explains the one thing holding female VCs back more than any other, how things are changing for female founders and for male founders as well, and why so many new Japanese venture funds are being founded by women. But Sophie tells that story much better than I can. So let's get right to the interview. So we're sitting here with Sophie Meralli, a brand new partner at Shizen Capital. So thanks for sitting down with me.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're not new to VC, but you're new to Shizen. So tell me a little bit about your new role, what kind of things you're looking for.
Yeah, sure. For me, it's kind of interesting because I was in early stage in Boston. And then when I came back to Japan, I was with H-Woods Ventures for about 5.5 years, looking more into growth stage startups in fintech, enterprise SaaS. And those are really the area that I think are super interesting to me in Japan, where I see a lot of potential. And so at Shizen, given this is much more like early stage, there are tons of ideas for which there are already unicorns abroad, but in Japan, those haven't surfaced yet. And I'm really excited to either incubate new businesses or just be able to be a sales partner for very early stage startups in those sectors.
Now, you mentioned your experience back at InnoSpark, right? In
Yes.
Boston. If I recall, back then you were looking at AI startups and sort of the previous generation of AI startups. What's your take on the situation of AI startups here in Japan right now?
I think AI right now, industry is very full of hype and very agentic.
Yeah. For various meanings of that word.
Yes. Back in the days, it was much more about machine learning and being very application driven. And so I invested, for example, in companies that help construction site being able to do inspection in a less manual way with drones and AI automation. And that enabled drop the time to do a survey from 2 months to 30 minutes. And that was really new at that time. We did that also for dentists.
Yeah, I think that kind of previous generation of AI was really use case focused. And there's still a lot, whether it's in like predictive maintenance, a lot of medical applications. Do you see the same thing happening in the current crop of AI startups, the LLM startups?
I still have to try to understand the business model and use cases. So I'm trying to be a bit more, I wouldn't say skeptical because I'm very excited as well. But I think generative AI needs to be taken with a grain of salt. And if you have a lot of average input, then you get average output too. So what can really a big data set do is become average quality sometimes, right? So I'm excited to learn more about the data that these startups are using and the exact use cases that they want to tackle, rather than trying to completely fully automate jobs. I think we're still a bit far away from that. Although I'm using Claude and ChatGPT every day myself.
I'm the same way, actually. I use ChatGPT, I use Perplexity every single day, but I'm also a huge AI skeptic in terms of actually
investing in the companies and whether they can live up to the hype. But actually, one thing I really want to talk to you about, let's talk about women in VC.
Yes.
Both the organization and, well, the actual women who are in VC. So you and Shino Furukawa founded Tokyo Women in VC a couple of years ago, back in 2020, right?
Yes, exactly.
So tell me about the organization. What do you do? Why did you start it?
Sure, I would love to. Basically, when I was in Boston, there was an amazing women in VC community called Breaking 7%, because there were only 7% decision makers that were women back in the days. And we met almost every month through dinners and exchange ideas. And it was more of a ask me anything kind of community where members come up with problems and they share it with each other. And that really helped me a lot to build my network, because in the US, I knew almost like no one. And when I came back to Japan, it was 2020, it was COVID. It was very hard to network, and I felt that women in VC were also a bit isolated. And so I discussed with a few women in VC, and Shino, who is a very dear friend of mine, she was actually pregnant at that time. So I felt a bit guilty to ask her to
take on more work.
my co-founder for this. But at the same time, I was like, it must be her, And so she accepted, and she was very enthusiastic about it. So we launched the community in 2020 with about 30 members only.
Well, and you were mentioning the 7% decision makers in the US. I would imagine that number is lower in Japan.
Yeah, so now in the US, it's about 16%, 18%.
Progress.
So a lot of progress. In Japan, we are doing a survey every year since 2020. And back in 2020, the number of decision makers was about 3%.
Wow.
Total VCs.
So what is a decision maker? Is it a partner?
Yeah.
Is it so partner level or higher?
It's a partner or a GP, basically someone who has a voice at the investment committee. And now in 2024, we have about 8.4% women decision makers.
Well, it's low, but that's a lot of progress in just 5 years.
Yes. And one interesting trend is that rather than being internally promoted, it comes a lot by launching your own fund, because the fund cycles are so long, 10 years. So there's promotion to partner or decision maker often when there's a new fund coming up, and there's not a new fund every year. It's mostly every 3-5 years. So a lot of women actually launch their own fund, and that's how they become partner. Of course, there are some exceptions, which is a great sign for the ecosystem when women are also promoted internally.
That is interesting. So, I mean, of course, it makes sense that there will be more women at the newer funds, right? Just because you don't have a whole lot of mobility in an existing fund. You just don't.
Yeah.
But are there a lot of women raising their own funds now in Japan?
Well,
because it would seem to me that's a lot harder than joining a fund. I mean,
so in terms of women launching their own fund, I wouldn't say that there are a lot. Unfortunately, we need many more to do that. But it's growing, and we're seeing a lot of women, launching their own. And I think we are about 20 to 30 women who are decision maker right now in the industry. And by 2030, we want to double that to 60 or more. And we have another KPI, which is the total number of women investors. And that's now 17% of the industry. And we hope to bring that to 30% by 2030.
The women who are decision makers. So men in VC in Japan are overwhelmingly finance guys from good schools who worked at tier 1 companies before jumping to VC. Women fit the same profile, or is there more variation there?
I think a lot of women who launch their own fund come from the VC industry, or some of them finance industry as well. I see some who were actually in the startup space.
So similar profile as the male VCs then?
Yes, I would say that there is not a trend that women have a different profile than a male counterpart. That being said, when they launch their own fund, they tend to have a different lens, and I see a lot doing funds focused on women entrepreneurs or women's health or impact, ESG. But obviously, there are also sectors like healthcare in general or B2B SaaS. And we don't want to have only women VC investing in women founders. We want to have women investor investing in B2B SaaS as well.
And this is something I've always felt like, especially a lot of the women founders in Japan. There's a lot of programs specifically designed to support women founders, and that's great. Mm. But far too many of them are trying to steer women into, for lack of a better word, feminine industries, cosmetics or fashion or which on one hand, like, okay, if you want to do that, that's great. But there's no reason they shouldn't be running B2B SaaS or quantum computing companies and in the VCs, do you think women have an easier time raising money if they're running that kind of a fund? Or is it just naturally this is an overlooked segment because men aren't running these kind of funds, so it's a low-hanging fruit?
That's a great question and a little bit controversial. But
is it? Okay, well, I imagine it would be.
No, but I like it. I would say that it's an overlooked market and no one's really digging into women entrepreneurs, women health. So it's kind of natural that as women investors, this opportunity arises and there's really a incentive also to take that opportunity and deliver great impact. So I think that's the natural flow of things. I also see some studies that show that women investors are 2 to 3 times more likely to invest in women founders than male investors. And that's the same reason why female investors tend to mingle with each other more than mixed groups, or same with male investors. It's all about homophily. So you tend to interact with people who have the same background, whether that's gender, ethnicity, or social. Because of that, you have this kind of natural connection between women entrepreneurs and women investors. However, as you pointed out, that does not mean that women entrepreneurs shouldn't target other industries. And we see some of them that are doing that and succeeding. For example, Needs More is an amazing startup with a women entrepreneur within more of the field service management, like dealing with plumbers and construction industry. Well,
I think you're right. There is a natural human tendency to want to be with people who we consider to be like us. I guess the end goal, though, is really to have people consider fellow entrepreneurs or fellow VCs to be more like them rather than male VCs or female VCs, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To make a broader category. So women in VC, you mentioned like when you started, you had like 30 members?
Yeah.
And you've got over 200 now. So what kind of things do you do other than general networking and support?
Yes. So our activity is very simple. We do monthly events and they take different shape, different format and topics. We have 3 types of customer persona within our community. One is the decision makers. The other one is the middle or junior layer in the VC space. And then outside of our community, we also interact with people interested in VC and that are not yet in the VC space. So they are outside of our 250 members, but these are our third persona, and we want to explain to them the word of VC, interact with them, so that we can perhaps give them more information so that they join the VC world,
So the aspiring VCs, are they university students? Are they people in finance looking to make a move? What's their profile?
Yes, when we look at how VCs operate their recruiting, they typically look at people who have already 3-4 years of experience in a different sector, such as startup or finance, tech, and they want to bring that experience to the VC world and learn the apprenticeship model for the next 10 years of becoming, a VC. So that's the typical profile. However, we also welcome students because I think it's so important to get exposed to this job because you need to cultivate an interest for it. It doesn't come right away, oh, I want to be a VC. You need to first understand what it is, and it can take some years.
Yeah, I think that's true. Most people who have not worked in the startup ecosystem in some capacity really have no conception of what a VC does. I think it's great that you are building the pipeline, building the awareness, getting more women, more people interested in VC. From my perspective, it seems like now in Japan, there is a real desire among most VC firms or many VC firms to hire women VCs. Is that industry-wide? Is that a sincere effort that you're seeing, or is this just my own network?
I think a lot of VCs are approaching it in a way where they're looking for diversity from different lands, whether that's gender or, finance versus tech. They want to bring people with different background, different gender, and sometimes people also bilingual so that they can help startups go global. And I think that's the right approach, and that shows a bit of the maturity of the ecosystem. However, it's hard to achieve. You need to really find the right talent, and you don't want to get into a vicious circle of, I need a 30% women, so I'm going to hire women. And I think that's not the right way to think about it.
So, moving from 3% participation from your first survey to 8.5% participation in your most recent one is huge progress. It's almost a tripling, even though the absolute numbers are still pretty small.
Yes.
But progress is good. So what are the hurdles? What are the problems now? Are they structural problems? Are they legal problems? Is it mostly just cultural?
There are a few problems. To me, in my perspective, VC is a people-driven job. So it's very network-based, especially in the early stages. And by being a minority, you don't get the same access to information, deal flow, and promotion opportunities.
So why wouldn't you have the same access to deal flow, especially at like a seed stage startup where so much of the deal flow is just going out and building your network and going to events and
yes.
Why wouldn't women have the same at that level, the same ability to network and the same pipeline as men?
There are a few reasons. So first of all, one way to source is going to events, but there are a lot of warm introductions, which comes from your network. For example, within VCs, a male VC might send that intro to another male VC and not to the women VC that they are not as close because they didn't go to nomikai together or something, So by being a minority, you don't get the same close ties with the same pool.
Within the VC community
Within
itself.
the VC or entrepreneur community, so your network will be a bit more limited, unfortunately. And the other part, which we ask, within our community, what are the biggest struggle that you see related to gender? The biggest one we get is that women feel very lonely being the only women at nomikai, for example.
Yeah, I can imagine that's really awkward and exhausting.
Yeah, and sometimes they're not even invited to these nomikais. And there's another thing that I'd like to mention sometimes is because of the Me Too and sexual harassment issues, sometimes men see high communication cost in inviting women for a dinner, for lunch, or so on, and that adds more friction then, because you will be more easily mentoring your male counterpart within the organization, or you might just invite a male friend because you don't want to have all these problems, right?
Yeah. I guess it introduces friction.
It introduces friction. Obviously, it's a sensitive topic, and there are some real issues.
But like I say, even when someone has the best of intentions, there is this subconscious friction that might be going on.
Yes, and that's why women might not get invited to these opportunities consciously or unconsciously, which create missed opportunities. I've seen also some funds saying, this entrepreneur is an old person and he will not take advice from a young woman, so we'll put as his counterpart a male analyst. And
a more junior,
and so when you see that, then of course the women won't get the same track record opportunity, deal flow opportunity, because there are still some men that think like that as well.
Yeah, and that's just, I mean, I see that too, not at my firm, but you would really expect the company to back their partner, right? Or, the principal or whatever level that person is at, and like say, no, she's really good, deal with her.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of men also understand that and are really amazing at empowering women. I think we have a lot of great male VC in the industry that support that cause, and like yourself or some other amazing mentors that I've had in the past, whether that was at my previous firm, my current firm, or within the advisors of Tokyo Women in VC. We have some people who genuinely want to give the same opportunity to women as men, and they don't hesitate to, hire women or give them mentoring opportunity, spare their time, give more advice than what's needed, which without that, we wouldn't be where we are right now.
Well, what's the next best step to take from here? What are things that need to happen to keep this momentum going and to overcome some of these either unconscious or sometimes not so unconscious biases?
So personally, and I think at Tokyo Women in VC, I think we all have the same mindset, which is action-driven. So to change the industry, we need to take action. And that's what we're doing right now by doing these events. So we're doing mentoring for women based on a cohort system where not only they make friends with each other, but also themes that don't have an answer. For example, how do I get the trust of an entrepreneur when I have zero track record? Like, we talk about these things, and we have top GPs as mentors like Kathy or Paul from Incubate and other amazing ones that share their experience, and all the members also share their experience, and that's so helpful to build confidence, to build trust. And we need that to decrease the risk of leaving the industry,
Yeah, but those are all really good, important things to be doing. But it's going to kind of sound strange to say it this way, but that's all like focused on the women.
Yes.
And I think like the men are the other half of the problem, or probably more than half the problem. And like, how do you reach the men to like get them past these biases and like?
So the way I involve the male VC community is through having them as mentors, or even for networking events as well, having male LPs discussing with women VCs. That provides an opportunity to get an investment for the women in their fund. So I want to involve them in a more business way to improve the skills of the network of those women, so that they start at the same starting line as the male in terms of network and other assets. However, I'm not a big believer of changing the unconscious bias of male, because also women might have that. And so doing training for male to remove this bias, I think that's not the fastest way.
I agree that one. But what about like kind of flipping the mentoring around and having more women in VC members like actively mentoring not just women founders, but male founders as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think that would, like, when you get these annoying founders like, oh, well, he's not going to listen to a woman. Well, if he's spent time in an environment where like a lot of the mentor are women and he's used to getting advice from women, and I don't know, it seemed like that would go a long way to solving these unconscious biases.
I totally agree with you. And I think we really want to build more role models in the industry. And for example, we highlight profiles of very amazing, strong women leaders in our Tokyo Women VC report to showcase their leadership. We also bring them speaker opportunity or mentoring opportunity to different organizations.
Oh, that's great.
So that we can, give them amazing opportunity to mentor male entrepreneurs or speaker engagements. And some of them, like Kathy or Satomaki-san, they're also mentors of our communities. So that's so inspiring. I think that gives us a lot of confidence.
For a foreign woman in Japan, do you think it's easier for you than for Japanese women in the same situation?
I would say it's harder.
Really?
Yes.
Why so?
Well, I'm not perfectly bilingual. I'm not native in Japanese, so the communication obviously has a little bit of friction sometimes. And so I'm really so grateful to, Eriko, Misuzu, Shino, because they trusted me, even though I am an outsider in a way, but I think that there are a lot of Japanese people who are eager to work with foreigners and who understand their perspective and are excited to mingle, and build something together.
I mean, that's absolutely true. I was thinking more in the sense of that as an outsider, a lot of people would not expect you to conform to the more traditional female Japanese roles.
Yeah, I think that's maybe when you become very senior, like yourself, Tim, then there is no more expectation. But on my end, I still have a long way to get there. So
okay. It's somewhat surprising and incredibly encouraging to see how much progress has been made by women in VC over the last 5 years. Do you see similar progress being made by women entrepreneurs here in Japan?
I don't have the exact statistics for women entrepreneur and the funding that goes to them, but it doesn't seem like it tripled the past 5 years.
Doesn't feel like it, no.
So I think that's a big problem. And also in Europe and in the US, even though the share of women investors has increased, the total pool that goes to women founders hasn't seen such a traction. So I think it's not only a Japan problem. And I think we need to have more women entrepreneurs. Maybe the absolute number also is not big enough. That can be also one of the problems.
It is. I don't have numbers either, but I get a lot of conflicting anecdotal experiences. I mean, of course, I meet a lot of women founders, but those are women who've gotten through all the filters and overcome the difficulties, so they've kind of emerged and gotten funding. The numbers still seem small, but there's other things like a few years ago at TEPCO, we sponsored a startup weekend for ideas for startups in energy. And the winning team was led by these 2 junior high school girls who lied to their parents, escaped from Juku so they could come and join this entrepreneurship program. So I see the talent there. But as you say, it's even if numbers are getting better, they certainly haven't tripled in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I think it's starting to become a community. We see a lot of women accelerator programs. We see also Tokyo government putting money into women entrepreneur-driven funds, Next Blue and W Power. That would create some more momentum because, as you said, the talent is there. I saw also when I was a judge at Sushi Tech, they had actually more women winners than men.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
So I think once you start to have quota for applicants, then you start to have as many women, as many men pitching, and then you don't have quota for winners, but you ended up having more women who win, and it happens in different situations to me also at La French Tech, also as a board member of the Tokyo French Tech. We had a situation where we were saying, we don't have enough women who will be applying for a board position. And then turns out that more women than men were elected in the end. So once you have no excuse and you have the talent, then you'll see the results will be great.
I think so too. I guess maybe it's just going to take a little longer for that to filter up. I mean, we're seeing it in different places. Listen, Sophie, before I let you go, I want to ask you what I call my magic wand question.
Oh,
And that is, if I gave you a magic wand and I told you that you could change one thing about Japan, the education system, the general attitude towards women, the ambition women set for themselves, I mean, anything at all to make things better for startups and innovation in Japan, what would you change?
I think one thing that I find always interesting is that only maybe 20% in Japan have a passport. And to me, I've grown up in France, I've studied in London, worked also in Japan, in the US, and I didn't even know what is a startup when I worked in Japan, in 2013. And when I went to Boston to do an MBA, and they were asking who wants to launch their own company, and half the class raised their hand. And I was like, oh, whoa, am I missing something? And I think that really opened my mind. And I hope that more people in Japan go out of their comfort zone. And if we could increase the number of people who go abroad, even for 1 year study or internship program and so on, and we raise that 20% to 80%.
So is the idea just having more Japanese people traveling abroad, being exposed to startup culture will normalize it and want them to bring it back to Japan?
Yes, I would say not just traveling, but studying or working abroad at least a couple of years. I think that will be helpful to build this more, global mindset. And
Everyone always talks about a global mindset, and I think it means very different things to different people. What are you talking about when you say the importance of a global mindset?
I think it's taking the best of what's available and not just in your country. And so there's different way of doing things all over the world for any problem. And if you only focus on what's being done right now in your city or in your country, you will miss perspective. Tokyo Women in VC idea emerged because I was member of the Women in VC community in Boston.
Right, the global organization.
Yes,
right.
And then when I came here, I saw that there was not such an ecosystem yet. So if I had not been there, I don't think there would be a Tokyo Women in VC.
Now, what's interesting about this, and I agree totally with you, but what's interesting is that Japan used to be famously good at this, of looking abroad, finding the best things, bringing them back, and creating their own unique version of things. And somehow that skill has, I don't want to say has been lost, but it's certainly been greatly diminished. You're right, we don't see that awareness of what's going on globally.
Yes, I think also it's such an amazing country. I don't know if there is a lot of incentive for people to go out of Japan. It's just such an amazing country.
Well, yeah, people can get very comfortable here.
Yes, I am very comfortable here, for example.
Me too. That's why I've been here 30 years.
But I think it's something deeper about not being with your peers, not being with a Japanese group, but being alone and, having to figure out what to do with your life.
Yeah, so you're right. I think that is like a fountain of creativity, being pushed into a situation like that.
Yes, and having curiosity, being eager to unlearn and challenge yourself. For example, I didn't speak Japanese when I came here, but I wanted to learn. And so I was okay not speaking perfectly when I was speaking to people. They were very patient with me, obviously. But I think in Japan, everyone wants to be very perfect and not get out of the comfort zone, the risk-averse culture.
You make a really good point that putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation leading to creativity and innovative mindset. Everywhere in the world, whether you're looking at Silicon Valley, whether you're looking at Tokyo, whether you're looking at London, immigrants and foreigners play an outsized role in founding startups. And I think what you're pointing out is one of the core reasons for that. It forces you to think a little differently. It forces you to evaluate situations and look for opportunities differently than if you're in your home base, right?
Yes, it's kind of I wouldn't say it's entrepreneurship, but it's kind of the same process in a way that you kind of run into situation you never encountered before and you have to problem solve and figure things out. So I really relate to what you just said about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. Of course, it's very hard to convince people to go put themselves in uncomfortable, difficult situations. No one chooses to do that. You kind of find yourself in them. It just seems like the signs are of progress, both in terms of entrepreneurship in Japan in general and for women VCs and founders specifically.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah. Well, listen, Sophie, thanks so much for sitting down with me. I really appreciate it.
Tim, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And we're back. You know, it seems like this always happens. After the interview is over and I'm packing up my podcast gear and talking with a guest, we start talking about things that I really wish I could have had recorded to share with you on the show. In this case, as I was putting away the mics, Sophie was telling me about the results from the annual survey of women in VC, where they asked about the biggest problems they faced. She explained that sexual harassment and direct discrimination were pretty far down on that list. It happens, of course, but overwhelmingly, the problems women cited were ones of inclusion. Things like not being invited to the nomikai drinking sessions where many deals actually get done, or sometimes the awkwardness of being the only woman at a networking event. Now, those are real problems, but they seem easier to address than those based on outright discrimination. These are problems of oversight rather than malice, and that makes them easier to fix. Sophie also pointed out that things like sensitivity and diversity trainings were simply not the answer. Telling people, most of whom are trying to do the right thing, telling them that they are the problem will just never be productive. The best way forward is through increased interaction and participation. And yeah, it seems like that might take longer than a more direct route. And it's certainly true that women make up a much smaller percentage of both founders and VCs in Japan than in the US or in Europe. But in some ways, it feels that Japan is making faster progress, even if that's only because women in Japan were starting from much further behind. Now, hard numbers are hard to come by, but women seem to be making much faster progress in the startup world, both as founders and as VCs, than they are in other industries or in society as a whole. And maybe that's because startups are such a new and fast-growing industry. It doesn't have the baggage that comes with decades of tradition or established networks, and that makes change easier. It's an important way that startups help not just the economy, but help move all society forward. If you want to talk more about women in VC, Sophie and I would love to talk with you, so come by disruptingjapan.com/show237 and let's talk about it. And if you enjoy Disrupting Japan, share a link online or just tell people about it. Disrupting Japan is free forever, and letting people know about it is the absolute best way you can support the podcast. But most of all, thanks for listening. And thank you for letting people interested in Japanese startups and VCs know about the show. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for listening to Disrupting Japan.